Hi, my name is Lynette Mothamia. This is Africa's Junction. This is a channel that touches on all things development, economics, and political, and in the African continent. Now, today, our guest is a financial and economist analyst, and he has vast experience in this sector. And also, he's a lecturer at Oxford Brookes in the UK. Welcome, Dr. Reginald Kadzutu.
Thank you, Lynette.
Karibu sana. And I think we can just begin. So my first question is based on the finance bill last year, the proposed finance bill. And we know that the Gen Z went to the streets and they were protesting the overtaxation that was in that bill. So on the government side, they said that we have a public debt of 2.7 billion USD, and we need to find a way of raising that money. So how did we, because I like to see what happened in the past, how did we get to this situation where we have 68% of our GDP paying loans, and yet in 2010, it was only at 39% of the GDP that was paying loans? How did we get onto this slippery road, and what economic policies did we bring up that caused this situation of overtaxation now that we are feeling?
Thank you for the question, Lynette. I think it's an accumulation of bad policies or misprioritized policies over the years, over the last 15 or 20 years or so. The government normally plans, then looks for the funding. So you'll find the government will plan expenditure on areas which they consider priority to them. Then they go look for the money, and the money is found either through taxes, and if taxes are not enough, then they will go and borrow. So over the years, the Kenyan government has been living way beyond its means, without those additional expenditures coming back to actually grow the economy in a way that the debt will pay for itself. So the government has been having a huge government deficit, and deficit. When I mean deficit, I don't mean GDP to expenditure, but income to expenditure. And most of the times, the government will tell you we've reduced our deficit to 5% of GDP, but there are many numbers that you can manipulate there. But if you look at the gap between income and expenditure, income coming from taxes and expenditure, what the government is spending, during the Jubilee government, it was averaging around 30-40%. That means we're overspending by 40%. Now, if you're doing that every fiscal year for the next 5 years, that means by the end of 5 years, you've overspent by 200%. That means you are overspent by close to 2 fiscal budgets. Now, whenever there is a deficit, which cannot be covered by taxes, the government then has to borrow. They either borrow domestically, or they'll borrow from the Eurobond market, or look for aid from IMF, World Bank, and all those other things. So by the time President Ruto was coming in to power with his new government, the UDA government, there had been an accumulation of that, and most of those debts were also now coming due in terms of payments. So the payment structure also of the debts that were being borrowed were not well thought of, because most of them were maturing in big chunks together in fiscal years. So he finds himself with a government where most of the revenue he's collecting has to go pay debt, because debt has the first charge on the consolidated fund on revenue. So he enters into power and realizes the money that he thought he had to do his promises did not have. In itself, a bit surprising, because he was in the previous government as a deputy president, so he knew the situation.
That's true.
So you find all that accumulation is what led to the huge debt. Now, what economic policies made us lead to that? If you look, when the Jubilee government came in, they were heavily leaned towards infrastructure and rural electrification. So they went for big projects, the standard gauge railway, the first one that cost a humongous amount of money on inflated costs. No real evaluation was done on it because that project is not going to pay back itself. You need whatever it's currently carrying, you need to carry about 3-4 times of it for it to just break even. So up to now, the SGR has not broken even.
Yeah.
So it's such kind of projects, building rural electrification, putting electricity in the rural areas. Some of them did sound good. Yeah, opening up roads, building new roads for connectivity, all did sound good. But you then don't have to do everything in one fiscal cycle, or you don't have to do everything as a president. So
Okay.
such policies which are heavy on capital at what led to the government being in the situation it is right now.
Okay. So that does answer how we got into such high public debt. But you have said that the previous government should not have done all the development projects they did at one time. So how exactly do you suggest they should have done it? Because infrastructure is important for development.
I think that's where the debate comes from. Does infrastructure follow development, or does development follow infrastructure? So you can build a road and hope that by opening up this space, then businesses will come and let me use the SGR. We're given those stories that no, the SGR will make all these towns boom, all these
Yeah.
tops where people are and all that stuff. It has been close to 10, 12 years. Tito Ande is still Tito Ande. Voi is still Voi. Sultan Hamid is still Sultan Hamid. There
Yes.
is no improvement or growth that is actually taking place in that area. So when you have infrastructure projects, they need to come with a bit of economic background. So if we are going to build a 10-way expressway somewhere, there has to be some economic logic to say we see potential here, and the bottleneck to this place not thriving is that they do not have a good road connecting them either to the next city. So, for example, majority of the things that we import through the port of Mombasa is not fresh produce. It's not cut flowers, it's not fruits.
Yes.
Mostly it's tree. And that's why we have the tea
Yes.
auction in Mombasa.
Yes.
So, yes, should the SGR have gone to Naivasha, or should the SGR have gone to where most of the goods that we export are coming from? Yeah.
Okay.
Did we need an SGR to Naivasha, or did we need an airport around that area to reduce the cost of cut flowers and fresh fruits from Naivasha, Nakuru to go to JKA to be flown out of the country? So, as a president, if I was the president, that I want to be, it would be prioritizing. So, if you look at Kenya, Kenya is labor intensive, but it has capital deficit. So
Yes.
if you want to start in a way that you utilize the resources that you have and minimize the cost on the resources that you do not have. So one major problem that we have is that we are labor intensive, but majority of our labor is in the rural areas in agriculture. The question then is a government has to answer is how do we free that labor that is stuck in a low productive industry and release it as cheap labor to the manufacturing sector and other sectors that need cheap labor for them to grow. So the agricultural sector starts becoming your first priority area. How do I mechanize the agricultural sector at the same time reskill and upskill the labor that is in that place for it to be suitable for the manufacturing sector or down the value chain. In terms of, if it's tea, we want to process our tea, so we need people who are skilled in the drying of the tea, the oxidizing, the reoxidizing of the tea. So you remove them from being tea pluckers, but to people who know how to oxidize tea, how to roast coffee to different levels, how to decaffeinate tea and make these value-added products. So you release that labor from there and push it upstream or downstream the value chain. How do we reskill them to be drivers of trucks? How do we reskill them to be able to run warehouses and factories, as one side? And the other side, how do we then mechanize our agricultural sector so that we do not need so much labor there, and we free that labor to go to the manufacturing sector? So you'll find we would have spent the same amount we spent on the SGR and been able to achieve that in 5, 6, 7 years. You'll have had a whole educated labor force, adding value to the agricultural product system than, unfortunately, I don't know how the economic advisors advise that subsidizing fertilizer is the best way of helping the agricultural sector, but having subsidized fertilizer, but then not solving the problem of low productivity. Low productivity leads to low income. Low income leads to stagnant or sluggish economic growth. Then now, as a president, you have pressure to show what you've done. So you decide, I'll build a big road that no one can mistake and say, oh, at least he built a road, or at least he built a railway. The current president is building houses. At least he did affordable housing. But we are, again, if you look at affordable housing, we are solving a symptom of a dead rural economy where everyone is moving to Nairobi, and now you have a housing crisis, and you decide to fix the symptom of overpopulation in urban areas because you have killed the rural economy, where someone born in Kakamega should not have a desire to come to Nairobi apart from tourism. But you find everyone from around the country all end up congregating to Nairobi because that's the only place where you can get jobs, you can get construction jobs, you can get house help jobs, you can try and make some ends meet. So to solve that, they build houses in Nairobi. I'm thinking, no, to solve that, make sure that the economy in Kisumu, the economy in Nyeri, the economy in Machakos is functioning, that a person born and raised in Machakos has no desire to move to the city.